Hello, friends. We're back with another episode of Pursuit of Scrappiness podcast. Whether you're building a business or running a team or just starting out in your career, we are here to bring you scrappy and actionable insights on how to help you become more productive and maybe how to become more aware today about what's going on globally. Today we're doing a bit interesting, more different show than usual. Let me tell you all about it a bit later. My name is Janis Uldis, and I'm always here with the one man, Uldis Tärokans. Hey, Uldis.
With one van, or was it what?
One man, the man.
The man, the only man. All right, let's go.
And subscribe, follow us. If you want to catch our feed of over 80 episodes, please do that. So, what you normally hear us talk about, we talk about topics that are always relevant. Productivity, leadership, culture, scroll back episodes, they are timeless. But there's a lot of ongoing current topics that we kind of always wanted to discuss, such as, economy, inflation, geopolitics, recession, which is coming, all the things that are kind of, on top of our minds. And we teamed up with a very interesting guest today who will help us to get some kind of perspective on those topics. We are here with Matthew Mezinskis from Crypto Oasis podcast. Hey.
Kungi, sveiks, lai dzīvo. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for jumping on. Matthew is quite well versed in economy, macro. He's also creator of Porkopolis economics. Inflation, very favorite topic of his, as we just discussed. So, what we want to talk about today, just a really kind of discussion among three guys about what's going on in the world, how it affects us, how topics that are close to both our heart and our wallet as well. Inflation, recession, geopolitics, and hopefully try to kind of make sense of what's going on. And I would say, like, maybe we can get to the big devil, the inflation that's eating up what we have all saved, unless you're investing, which we were talking about in some of our previous podcasts. Maybe, Matthew, you can start telling about what you've been doing and researching in the space, and we take it from there.
Sure. So, again, thanks for having me on. I know that you guys are focused on, well, as you said in the intro, a lot of different startups and topics. What I do in the Bitcoin space, in the crypto space, and also in the, kind of economic surveying space is actually mostly a hobby. I'm not making big business on it just yet. We'll see. But I've been doing it for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I have a podcast focused on Bitcoin, money, economics, politics, and for the last 4 years, I've been doing some research on basically tracking all of the money that central banks print around the world, and that's obviously a hot topic in the Bitcoin world, but as we've seen, especially this year after the COVID stimulus, after, even after many on and off crises from 2008, the global financial collapse, Eurozone crisis, so on and so forth. A lot of countries generally they print, some print more than others, and I always heard economists and people, ranting and raving about inflation, but I couldn't quite wrap my head around if they knew what they were talking about or if they didn't, because I knew for a fact that from 2014 to about 2019, just before the COVID pandemic kicked off, the U.S. in particular was trying to normalize its balance sheet, meaning they were actually trying to print less, and they were printing less. They were letting a lot of the stimulus that they had printed since 2008 roll off the balance sheet, go back into the market. And so these types of things I was trying to figure out, because a lot of people are saying, they're still printing. And of course, granted, there's a lot of gold bugs, Bitcoiners, people that like to talk about this stuff. They always say that they print. And there's some merit to it. But if you actually drill down in the numbers, you see that some central banks are quite different than others. Regardless, I generally agree with the conclusion of Bitcoiners. That's why I like Bitcoin. And so that's kind of a main crux of the research that I've been doing it's been more than 4 years. I've been publicizing it for 4 years. But, it's basically the top 50 currencies in the world, top 50 central banks in the world actually tracking their balance sheet and tracking this thing that's called the monetary base, which is literally the printing press. It's all the cash and coin that we think, in our wallets, as you say. And then also there's a digital component of that as well. It's called the reserve account or the master account. And that is all of the money that each bank in the system holds with the central bank. So those two things together are called the monetary base. It's like the base of the financial system. And that literally is the printing press. And that's kind of the money supply that compares with Bitcoin. So that's one angle, I guess, of some things that I've been doing the last few years.
So this is from end of last year, the stat. 80% of US dollars in existence were printed in the last 2 years. So before last year, so basically now even more. Sounds like a true figure to you?
It's probably a little bit less. Again, when they say dollar, you usually have to qualify it. Are they talking about physical currency? Are they talking about the central bank currency, which I just mentioned, the monetary base? They're talking about M1, which also includes demand deposits from the banking system. I would tell you exactly, if you give me a moment, what it is for the monetary base, but it's a little bit less than that.
Well, the thing is, it's a astounding number. Nevertheless, 80 or 70, whatever, 75, right? Do you think it has anything to do with the inflation we're experiencing in the world?
It has indeed, yeah. It has indeed. And I've been listening to a lot of financial podcasts for years and years and following this stuff for years and years. And I think I got a few years on you guys out of did you both go to the Stockholm School?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep, we did.
Yeah.
We did.
But actually, in my former life, I was just a quick aside. I was worked in purchasing real estate in the good years and a little bit in the bad years. And we gave some presentations about real estate valuation to some Stockholm students. If I don't look familiar, it probably wasn't your class, but might have been before you guys.
We were very lazy to listen, so maybe we're met.
Especially guest lectures; those were probably not mandatory.
and yet here we are trying to sound smart about inflation now, 10 years later.
No, it's this is it's just funny, because. Obviously, you guys got good heads on your shoulders trying to figure this stuff out, and it's not easy to figure out. But at the end of the day, as Milton Friedman said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, and that means that the price inflation that you see, and usually I try to qualify that, like the price inflation that we see is usually, he says always and everywhere. He meant always and everywhere. It's a phenomenon of the stock of money increasing. Basic supply and demand. If the stock of something, the supply grows faster than the demand, ceteris paribus, prices will have to rise. Or the price of the thing, which is the money, is falling relative to other goods. So that's the basics of it, and that is absolutely true. And I think that's what most people can intuitively understand. But if you actually put numbers to it, it's even more just sort of insane that you would think of. And we can get to those numbers, but another thing I guess I just wanted to say just from the start is, and I said this at the Honey Badger conference recently, the Bitcoin Baltic Honey Badger conference in Riga, is I've read a lot of these gold bugs from the 80s and the 70s, and when Nixon cut the gold window and got off the gold standard. Gold was flying there for 10 years. It went from $35 an ounce, which is a statutory rate, and went to $850 an ounce. Americans could buy gold again, and there was bad times, the Vietnam War, all of these things. And if you were a hard money sort of trying to protect your family, classical, liberal, private property oriented person, you would be delighted in the fact that gold was flying in price. It was proving your thesis from an investment, from a hedging loss standpoint. You would think that you were doing quite well. And then, of course, what happened from 1980 till about 2000 is the gold price just slowly fell back down to about $200 an ounce. And so, again, this is markets, commodities, they go up, they go down. But the constant in that, which, again, is hard to fully go through, I guess, I don't want to fully go through my presentation for your listeners and viewers here, but central banks definitely do not like it when assets that check or rebuke their policies are there. And Bitcoin is one of those, and gold is one of those. So it's definitely a thing where they do not like the price of gold rising. And it's definitely a thing that they do not like the price of Bitcoin rising, and they'll always try to disparage it and whatnot. But, for young kids especially, I mean, Bitcoin is an easy escape hatch. It's absolutely a way out from this stuff. So I think it's just basic. Everybody should hold some, not financial advice, but, should at least look at it, figure it out, understand it, and then go from there, deciding what you want to do personally. But I will say, just again, sort of general disclaimer, like day to day, week to week, even month to month or year to year, it's tough. It does seem like this time may be different. Again, we'll get into the war stuff. We'll get into the political stuff. It does seem like this time may be different. Major geopolitical shifts in Europe, in particular. But, again, if you were a gold bug in like the 70s and 80s, like you could spend your whole life on this stuff, just railing and ranting and telling everybody they need to buy gold, and nothing would have happened, for another 40 years. So it's not easy. It's not easy to get through and parse through some of these things. That's kind of my main message there. But Bitcoin is cool. Bitcoin is new. It's definitely an escape hatch.
But one thing that puzzles me in this whole story is that we are, combining relatively, let's say, modest GDP growth, some kind of controlled economic situation, more or less. But then in these already big economies, you have this, double-digit inflation, even in like bigger, more extreme cases like Turkey, even, like 70%. But even back in the Baltics, like 20%, like how does it? That's where I struggle to wrap my head around. Like, how can we, not have like people in the streets and have such high inflation numbers? So what am I not getting?
Well, Eastern Europeans have a tendency to not go out into the streets, and we're very stoic. Your listeners might know I'm American originally, but my father is from Latvia, so we try to be more stoic and just deal with our stuff and get things done the best we can, work around it. But certainly other nations louder.
No one's more stoic than Russians. Like, do whatever you want, they won't take them to streets. So
yeah, well,
that was an alley-oop for you, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to describe Eastern Europeans in a good light there, saying stoic. I wouldn't exactly apply that to most Russians.
But like what Uldis said, it's actually, I looked up numbers. It is like August inflation in Europe, EU, Estonia, Turkey, of course, 80%, but like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, top three countries, basically over 20% each. So, yeah.
I saw them.
Yeah.
I saw them. And if you look at the dollar itself against all currencies, you're compounding that because the dollar has just soared. Like, basically, it's the best looking horse in the glue factory, right? So everybody, when times are tough and scary and people want to retreat to their, to their strongholds, they want to maybe take money out of more riskier investments. They will go into the dollar. They don't go into like, the yuan or like,
But is that it? Is that it? Because I was looking also at those charts that all currencies going weak against the dollar. Is it the safe haven story, or is there something else going on?
Well, it's proven to be. That's the interesting thing. So far, it has. It happened in 2008. That took people like Peter Schiff by surprise. Peter Schiff had correctly predicted pretty much most, even though he's a huge anti-Bitcoiner and is horrible on Bitcoin. He predicted most of the mortgage crisis, the mortgage-backed securities, the financial crisis, over-leveraging happened in the United States, and in parts of Europe. It was linked to bad securities being sold there. Peter Schiff predicted all that. He did not predict the flight back into the dollar, although very quickly after, like, gold maybe fell like 20%, and then in 2009 it soared back up again. So again, there's some lag there. And gold is doing nothing right now. Neither is Bitcoin, as we know, down big compared to last year. But there's a lag. It's very hard to I can't tell you what the price of oil or gold or whatever is going to be tomorrow. But I do think that we are set up for more risk-averse investments. And for now, that is even something like the dollar is showing to be strong. But gold, Bitcoin, I think those things are going to be better. But again, not financial advice. And basically just get a little bit more to the deeper part of your question there, talking about inflation, how to deal with it, all that stuff. In my day job, I do some financial consulting, corporate finance consulting. It's basically a lot of spreadsheet work. Matches some of the stuff I do with my website. I have investor clients in the U.S. in Latvia even, and we're trying to deal with right now budgeting. Like it's obviously it's looking much worse than it looked in COVID, and I don't see how the governments are not very clear right now in Europe what is happening about this winter and energy prices and whatnot. But it's what is absolutely clear is no one will be able to afford some of the price rises that you're seeing indicated on certain bills and keep the lights on for general businesses, paying employees, all the rest. And this is obviously a very bad thing for the currencies, which are already in a bad spot. But unless there is a major break in the war or the governments subsidize, there's really not any way that you'll be able to pay those differences. And that, again, it's just going to be worse and worse for the currency. So, that's why, even though I started this interview saying, be careful, we always think that there's a point where things could break. This could break. It does seem like this time is pretty precarious for Europe, and specifically for Europe. So it does seem pretty wild.
Is there some particular reason why the UK is getting pounded, pun intended? I mean, it's ridiculous. Somebody put it on Twitter that it's trading like a shitcoin. So.
Yep, it's pretty much a parity to the dollar. I don't know. I mean, the standard response there is that it's just they closed themselves off to the eurozone and to the euro markets with Brexit and everything. But I don't necessarily believe that. But I don't have a clear idea why the pound is crashing, other than just to say all currencies actually are crashing. If you looked at them. It is just more remarkable when you see something like the pound also crash against the dollar. But it is not unique in this situation compared to all other currencies.
Yeah, but as we kind of touched upon this energy prices, and clearly, I've seen stories already like of first electricity bill of some kind of hockey hall in Latvia that's like 10x or even more, and these stories are just going to come out more and more. Obviously, the only thing that can be done, and today I think the government of Latvia approved some kind of almost €500 million, which for Latvia is a lot of money, support for this. So everybody in Europe is going to have to do this. The question is, can the countries' like debt levels handle it? If it's combined with also rising interest rates. I think we're just getting to the point of what instruments do the countries even have left to fight this clusterfuck. Because there's on the one hand there's rising inflation. Okay, so we should rise interest rates to calm it down. But then we have to cover all these costs so we have to borrow more, so our debt service becomes higher. So what can we do? We have to print money, but then the inflation again goes higher. So where is there an escape like here?
There's definitely an escape. I mean, thank goodness for Bitcoin, and thank goodness that Bitcoin is here. Or I'd say was here, 10 years ago, especially during the depths of the financial crisis, as most people know or learned on the topic. But, that's when Bitcoin came out. And Bitcoin hasn't really been around during a crisis, which is another interesting thing to see, because we're in the midst of one right now, and it's going to get worse this winter. I think that if you looked at sort of all the things in the negative columns, the unrest, the war, the price inflation, the monetary inflation, the high cost, as you said, with energy, and then the interest burden, which is just continuing to get more and more insane on all governments. And then you looked at the things in the positive columns, which is
COVID.
I don't know.
It's positive for many people. Yeah. Including myself,
Yes.
actually, last week. So yeah.
Sorry to hear that. How you doing? You doing all right?
I'm totally fine.
Good. But no, I mean, yeah. The one positive with COVID is we finally gotten through that and all the sort of ridiculous mandates that governments were putting on their citizens. But there's not many. There's not many things in the positive column. I do feel heartened as an Eastern European, as someone who, as you guys well know, we're not going back to the Soviet Union like in tough times. Like the wild thing right now, again, I'm getting on a tangent. Stop me if you want, but the wild thing right now that we're seeing, it's just in the last 24 hours, what I've been seeing on Ukraine Twitter, war Twitter, that's happening in Iran, Moldova, Dagestan, in particular, which is they seem to be the one area of Russia that's really, really just rejecting mobilization. Not to mention the fact that the mobilization is just Russian-style, complete clusterfuck. I mean, absolute, drafting pensioners, disabled people, just all, just totally Russian-style, like just going into this with no idea what they're doing.
You're in the wrong place, wrong time. You're getting picked up. It's
yeah, people that are getting arrested for protesting. I mean, the world is finally seeing like what this kleptocratic, autocratic, awful government is like, and we're not going to let Ukraine go back to that, and they don't want to go back to it, and nor should they have to go back to that. So I think from that one side, like that's a real positive. I mean, I remember my father was involved in a lot of American Latvian stuff back in the day, and the feelings of freedom, I believe, are similar. It's just crazy because now it's much more violent. We had. In 1989, 1991, it was like freedom, done with this 50 years of this nonsense, Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, all the rest. Very few deaths, although there were some in the Baltics primarily.
You could that's the thing. Not to underappreciate anything. It's just it was tragic, but like it could have been so much worse actually if you think about it.
Yeah. But now you have parts of Eastern Europe who are still under the thumb, still under this. Russian influence, which somehow some sad apologist tankies in the West think that they should be under some Russian influence. It would be better for world order, which obviously none of us would agree with. But the feelings of freedom are like really, really high. It's just coming with a huge cost this time, huge violence. And in 1989, 1990, we were still coming down. We were the reason why gold was sort of falling at those times and other markets were rising is because Paul Volcker had interest rates at 20% in 1980, so they were coming down. Assets were all getting cheaper. Of course, bonds were getting more expensive, but the assets were getting more expensive, but the leverage was getting easier. It was easier and easier to draw debt when you had lower and lower interest rates. So now it's the exact opposite situation. You have all this unrest, definitely feelings of freedom for those that understand it, but you have violence and you have interest rates going up. It's like really weird, and it's really, with all the gas, weaponizing of the gas, it's like it's more threatening, more scary for sure for Europe.
But it looks like, I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, people can, give in and etc. But it looks like at the end of the day, it's just a matter of kind of surviving the winter, and I haven't done like a very thorough analysis, but my common sense would say that by the next fall, the market should figure things out, right? The energy, let's say, supply channels should be replenished, should be maybe the overall price level. If Russian output was like, I don't know, of global output, 10%, then maybe, the base level of the price will be 10% higher. I don't know. But I mean, it has to normalize. So it's just a matter of can we hang on? Can the governments kind of hold it financially? Can the societies handle it socially? And basically, can we survive this for freedom? Because at the end of the day, obviously, it is all about freedom.
Absolutely, I'm up on the air. I'm up in the air on the freedom part. I think we absolutely We'll survive it. The nuclear stuff, okay, that's being blown up a lot in the U.S., obviously, and people want to be pacifists and, kneel to Russia on that issue. I think that all the deterrents, nuclear-wise, have been made. They continue to be made. I think that we're pretty strong there from the West, from NATO, from liberal democracies, saying that, like, look, you're not going to tactically nuke or do any sort of ridiculous, world-altering event in Ukraine just because you feel like controlling, 40 million people there of Eastern Orthodox
you're basically evoking nuclear threats to, I don't know, defend Severodonetsk that you took like 3 weeks ago. It's like, if you think about it, it's so mental. This is another factor that can play out. In terms of winter,
but the freedom part, not to interrupt, Janis, I just say in response to Uldis as well, like the freedom part is, I think, up in the air. I mean, some, arguably non-European harmony type views coming out of Italy, although I understand the views that Italians have based on the new Prime Minister Meloni that was just elected, but or her party, I guess, that came to power, right? The European project seems precarious. Freedom seems precarious, but to me, I would say it does not seem precarious from like a Central and Eastern European perspective. Nordics as well. But I just don't know how that looks. Like, could it be that like we redraw, sort of the European Union or European alliances? Maybe. I mean, like maps are redrawn all the time, and this is like wild stuff. It seems like coming out of all parts of Europe.
One thing I wanted to challenge you on that you mentioned before, and that's kind of, it reminds me a bit of, underpants gnomes from South Park. When people say that, Bitcoin fixes this, there's some kind of problem, Bitcoin fixes this. And you said that, there's Bitcoin that is a kind of a positive, a hope, a shining light or whatever. But what I haven't really heard is like, I understand perfectly how it fixes something for you as a private individual if you have it and you believe that it will rise in value because of all of this shit. What I don't, which is the underpants gnome part, is like, how does it how do we get from the current system to whatever benefits we get from Bitcoin without global revolution, disruption, breaking down of current world order and basically starting from scratch. So I was wondering if you have such vision, how it can be done not only on a micro but on a macro level, how Bitcoin can benefit us.
Well, if you refer to my last answer, it may be that that global breakdown is already upon us. We don't have to worry about Bitcoin taking, being a part of that from the negative. But no, I understand your point. And look, I'm one of these guys that I'm pretty solid in my views, and that I don't really care what El Salvador is doing with it. I don't really care what Europe even regulates with it, or China says that miners need to go. There are going to be absolute challenges. The biggest challenge is the state. You're right. It absolutely is going to be the state, because that's, $30 trillion roughly is the global monetary base. That's the global sort of seniorage that central banks have been able to print without any restraint, and that's like throughout modern history. They're not going to want to let go of that. 80% of that, by the way, I was just checking, has been printed since 2007 already. So that's even more. Little not as extreme as what you were saying, but with the monetary base, 80% has been printed since 2007, digitally and physically. So, it's absolutely true that they're going to want to protect what they have, the printing press. But I think my view is just it's long term, man. It's long term, not a matter of days, weeks, months. We're talking years and years. I've been in the space a long time, heard a lot of arguments. People are going to continue to, Elon Musk coming in talking about how Dogecoin is going to be a better transactional currency. You're going to hear all this stuff again and again and again. Bitcoin's, needs a tail emission. It needs, more security. You're going to hear all of these things. It's not private enough, or it's too private, or, we got to change certain things. But, at the end of the day, It has shown to be robust. It has done its job in being like the most secure, censorship-resistant ledger ever created, which is pretty cool, especially for geeks like us. At least for me, like I enjoy spreadsheets and proving numbers out, and it's an amazing proof. And I think that there are a lot of things that can still be done. I know there's a lot of competing ideas on shitcoins and other crypto and stuff, which most Bitcoin maxis hate. I don't really care. Let them try it, see what happens. But I think this is generational. No young person has a difficulty understanding that there can be native digital money. They will move there. And even if, the most draconian of regulations come in Europe, it will go underground, but they're not going to kill it. And I'm just looking at it that way. I mean, it's totally long term. You're going to have different politicians take different views. And look at all the other currencies. They're absolute garbage anyway compared to even the dollar. So if we're ended up with just the dollar and Bitcoin as like your transactional currency and then your store value currency or asset for many years, and then eventually Bitcoin takes over like 50 years from now, so be it. It's not really my concern. Like, I'm not worried about it. I don't stay up at night thinking about how hyper Bitcoinization can take hold. I think it's long term. And
so if there's trillions and trillions of government debt, so that they should just also get some Bitcoin and not to default on that completely. Eh?
That is what El Salvador and some smaller governments are doing. But again, it's these little paradoxes. Like I'm not a huge fan of the state, especially with money, because you could still think about it. You could still have a government that does things like, Bitcoiners have hardcore anarcho-capitalist views. There's people on all ends of the spectrum, right? You can talk about no government or like total socialist Bitcoiners that want Bitcoin and all government, no other business. Like you have all ends of this all sides of the spectrum, right? With Bitcoin, but you can still have where we are today, like governments taxing, spending, and borrowing, and markets and everything. You just remove the central bank from the picture, and what that does is it creates a more fair and free market for government debt, which would hold governments accountable. Now, like you said, that's not happening tomorrow. It might happen for some countries that need to default, but at least for the big ones, like they have a pretty strong grasp over the system for now. But basically, every dollar that the central bank prints and buys, they don't buy it from the Treasury. They buy the Treasury bonds from the market directly. So what they do is every bond that they buy, every dollar or euro or yen that they print, it's kind of an artificial floor on government debt. It makes government debt look better than it otherwise would look in a free market. And that's really all it is. So if that goes away, it's not the end of the world. Like, you can still have competing governments. You can still have taxing and spending and all the political riffraff that we still have today. You can have all of that. You just don't have the ability to print your way out of some of your deficits. And that's a big game changer. So from that side, I think that Bitcoin, again, is a lot of hope. It's a lot of, all the buzzwords, peace, prosperity, all these things can come from it. Needless wars won't be, spent and waged.
Won't be funded.
So those are the good things, I guess. And I think I already forgot the premise of your question if I fully answered it. But you see I get on these tangents.
No, I get it. And I guess the final question on this topic should be then whether it's possible to go back to 2 years ago or 3 years ago of printing endlessly and not having double-digit inflation. Do you see a scenario of somehow them getting inflation under control? Because, I mean, if there was no inflation, I mean, everyone would be just fine continuously printing along, right? So,
nobody would.
Well,
do you think it's possible?
You could have printed like crazy and not had COVID and not had this inflation, because you would still have a larger demand drivers. You'd have more factories running, wouldn't have all this slack and all this, like, the shutdowns and everything. You could have had some of that sopped up, as they say in the monetaries, but you have some of that monetary inflation, that excess printing sopped up in the economy that was like spurred with more lending and whatnot. But again, obviously, I'm not a fan of that. I don't think that that's like a good policy. And these are just short-term fixes, for the main problem, which is
yeah. But there's so much debt. I mean, how can they repay it if it's not printed?
They can't. I mean, the U.S. it will never default. At least as long as it can last, it will never default explicitly. But there's this implicit default, as you say, or as they say, which is what you're saying, which is just you print a little bit more to paper over it. And then you just run through this scenario again. But look, it's not the 80s. It's not the 90s anymore. You can't just keep taking interest rates a little bit lower. We're at zero. So we saw with the experiment with negative interest rates, that doesn't really work. And, to make money on a negative interest rate bond, you got to sell it to another sucker who would take a worse negative rate. That's how you make interest on a negative rate bond. It's just insane. It's so odd. But that's what they're trying to do. So no, it's bad, man. I don't dispute that at all. I think we're all on the same page there.
Okay, let me
think about some more things to say.
Let's add to the bad. So I think one part that is a bit scary is the extremism politically that we see in the Western world. So as you mentioned, in Italy, just quite right-wing party took over, and that's not a problem in itself. To me, I think a bigger issue and the bigger question is like, why is the left so crazy and the progressive thinkers are so extreme and crazy in their approach that people are revolting by kind of dropping also to let's say questionable moral positions and ethical positions and kind of the kind of degrading into more base selves on both ends of the spectrum, and we wanted to talk about this in the context of the US midterm election, because it feels like Biden has done everything to destroy this election for the Democratic Party that is pretty much possible. On the other hand, obviously, all governments are being criticized as having massively kind of botched the COVID response, to which I don't really fully agree. But now it's very easy, especially I don't know about other countries, but in Latvia, I would say that if the question of people dying instantly, I think, should be put above some theoretical effects of economic slowdown. But yeah, so this very, very long introduction, I wanted to open up like this. What do you think? Why has it become so extreme? And it's, I think, the easiest place where to see it is in the US, because it's the two-party system where it's very kind of adversarial and very kind of, sometimes like looks like some two kind of football club ultras, hating each other to the death. That guy is a, Republican or a Democrat. It's not even really a human anymore.
Yeah. Well, I would say, again, I look at this as like, I try to look at it long term as a generalist, and like trying to just protect your wealth and your family as much as you can before worrying about politics, because you're always going to be let down. I have some Italian friends, to start with the Italy thing, and they think that this party's not going to last, Meloni's party. It is very scary, though, that her main rivals in the coalition are Berlusconi and this Salvini, I think it is. Both are absolute Putin pawns, Putin prosties, I think, is even called, like Putin prostitute is Salvini to Berlusconi. Like they're absolutely paid, bought, corrupt. Berlusconi is, he's been brought to court like 18 times or something. I think his lawyer served prison time for him at one point. The guy is just insane. He's hilarious how insane he is, but he's insane. And those types of views, I think, are interesting. And you can apply this to the U.S. as well, is that it really, I watched some of her speech, or I'm sure you guys did as well, on Twitter and stuff, and she's really bringing up the SJW issues, the social justice warrior issues. We've gone way too much on the labels and the trans debates and all this other stuff, and I think those things are absolutely important to certain people, and I think that I can sympathize with some of the, especially in Italy, a very conservative, like Christian Catholic culture, that they would reject some of that. So from that side, I don't have any issue. Obviously, I mean, they're going to vote for what they need to vote for and do what they need to do. But I would bring it back to Eastern Europe again with the war, because if you talk about the U.S. as well, the federal government in the U.S. is bloated. It's got problems. We've got a lot of problems. We've got to fix them. And having someone like Trump come back in 2 years from now would be even worse. But other than that, it's like every issue, I look at it as just like, you're arguing about if you want boys to wear tutus or not. I mean, these are so inconsequential compared to what we're dealing with here, where it's like literally the front lines of the last dictators in Europe, Lukashenko, Putin, totalitarian, kleptocratic regimes. I'm a big follower, a big fan of Toomas Ilves from Estonia, former president, American Estonia. Mm-hmm. You don't hear it too much in the English language in Eastern Europe, like to the bone, raw, hardcore. Like, look, you guys have been West-splaining us for years. We've warned you about the real dangers to freedom in Europe. And it's not, again, like as much as you may think that it's like whether boys should wear tutus or not, like that's not the real issue. The real issue is, a post-Soviet Bolshevik-style kleptocratic neighbor that literally they have no rule of law. You can see it in everything that happens with Twitter. There's no, if you are a party of more than one, and now just if you're sitting at a bus stop, they will arrest you if you're breaking their peace. And so there's nothing. If you care about private property, if you care about freedom, if you care about liberty and values, like this is the part of the world you need to focus on. And so for me, I'm actually, as I said before, same answer. I'm heartened by the resolve of Poland, the Baltics, the Czechs, the Slovaks, Hungarians, a little bit. Obviously there's leadership issues there, but the Nordics. I mean, it's a whole new ball game, and I mean, what's happening like in Dagestan would be unthinkable. It would just be unthinkable before this war, and people are standing up, finally saying no to this guy. It's going to take, there's miles and miles, kilometers and kilometers of 3-4 road cars, through the south of Russia trying to get in the Caucasus or into Kazakhstan or wherever. We're not letting them in here. So it's really tense there. They have to rise up and just kick these people out. But again, the question is after that, who's going to come after? Is it going to be worse? All the rest. But these, this is 2022, and we're talking about, again, like you think that the biggest problem is some of your little social justice issues. I'm sorry, the biggest problem is happening right here in Eastern Europe. And this is like the resolve we need to be focused on. And from what I can understand, Meloni, she is much more moderate there, much more sympathetic than obviously Berlusconi or Salvini. Most of the United States in general is as well. And I think most Europeans are as well sympathetic to this, but they're not seeing it yet. They're not seeing how front and center this is going to be. Like, this is generational. This could absolutely change. It could change the map of Europe. It could change the alliances of Europe. So Italy, we'll see where Italy goes there. But my friends aren't very enthusiastic that this party will last.
And how do you see the U.S. in this also global kind of superpower context? I think so far, it's been the main kind of champion of Ukraine in terms of, let's call it weighted economics weighted or economy weighted champion. So do you see that there's any threat for that changing if Republicans take higher control? I mean, mostly they're also quite hawkish, but but there are some pretty loud voices that are more isolationist and realpolitik kind of voices.
Yeah, realpolitik is coming back, and that's interesting because obviously during the neocon years it was complete opposite roles. But I think there as well you can see when it comes to like true ideas of liberty. And look, I'm not at all defending the Afghan invasion, the Iraq invasion. I mean, most of the world, except for Britain, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of the United States at the time, was against what Bush was doing in light of the 9/11 tragedy. That put us in a bad light, and I think there's still a lot of bad blood there. There's a lot of bad precedent. That was a problem. It's absolutely a problem. But now, when it doesn't excuse the fact that you have the exact same thing happening from an aggressive nation, which is absolutely totalitarian and tyrannical, trying to take over another country. I think that resolve will remain for the United States. And it's just like, Clinton, when Clinton was in power, you had the Visegrad countries come into NATO. And then when Bush was in power, you had the Baltics in the next round of some of the smaller Eastern European states. Which, by the way, is another argument against NATO, like provoking Putin. Like that was the narrative of the day back in February. Remember, like it was all NATO's fault.
Still today being used by some. My favorite Republican commentator, David Sachs, in every All In episode reminds that every not 1 inch east. Was it you that told me that it was actually a bit different than being advertised?
Absolutely. We can talk about that as well. But I mean, first of all, regarding NATO, like it was 2004 was the last major enlargement of, say, the Eastern Bloc countries. Baltics were there, obviously. Poland and Hungary had been in. Czech Republic had been in. Slovakia, some of the other Bulgaria, Romania, those countries. And from that point on, it was done. There was no major Eastern expansion. Like you had Croatia, North Macedonia, Albania in the recent years. But since 2004, like anything that's been close to encroaching or aggressive on Putin's borders has been done, has been completed. And, you could have a low-level infantryman in the Baltics, it was barely a twinkle in his father's eye in 2003, 2004. And now, he could have even a higher rank than that. I mean, in 2022, and, we've had more years between now and then than between then and the end of the Soviet Union. Like, there's no way that Putin just, wakes up one day 18 years later and is like, oh, fuck. Yeah. Invade, Ukraine and destroy and mutilate and deport and, rape all of their citizens. Like, it's absolutely an insane argument.
But this argument that people are making, I mean, like, it calls into question all our, like, human values, basically, because you're just saying, like, because once, these countries sort of were affiliated with this other country, that gives this other bigger country full right to, do whatever and impose their will and like genocide at ease, basically. This is such a bullshit. I mean, like in that sense, U.S. should be then subdued to Britain, and maybe Britain itself would be part of Italy because it was under Rome as well. At some point, we can go
100%.
We can go back, right?
100%.
Yeah.
It makes it easy to criticize because of Afghanistan and Iraq, right?
But this is also the biggest bullshit. Like every time you have these Twitter trolls or whatever, like somebody posts about like, come on, let's stop Russia. But what about Iraq, Afghanistan? Sure, but come on. I mean, like, it's not that U.S. went in there and started like massacring people. It's not that U.S. is trying to re-educate and enforce a new doctrine, new civilization upon those people. It's two different wars that are being fought there, and even if for the wrong reasons, Afghanistan, Iraq, still tragic, but very different power is going in there. Like Russia is not U.S.
And not to be, not to forget that Russia themselves went in, and that was, what Rocky IV was about, or not Rocky, but Rambo. Not to forget that they made the same mistakes, and it's obviously it's not, again, it's all whataboutism with there. I am not happy with it. I think that I was in university at the time. Like that was the argument of our times, right? Like I came into university the year of 9/11, that fall, September. Like I was a freshman, and I was like, that was the argument of our times, and it was so much hysteria. It was so much, you could tell that Bush was using the situation. But as I started to say before, even if it was Gore, even if like none of that even happened, for one, I guarantee you the Baltics would have still been in NATO and all of Eastern Europe, because they had a whole different history that they were fighting against. So yeah, to your point, Janis, it's completely different.
It's not like the U.S. tried to expand to the Eastern Europe. It's the Eastern Europe that begged to be protected from Russia, basically.
Yeah, 100%. And then to the point about not 1 inch, this is the most confused, muddled, awful topic, and people have no idea about just how a map looked like in 1989. So very quickly on this, there's a great book. It's called Not 1 Inch. It's by, I forget her name. Maybe it's Marie Sorat. I forget her first name, but Sorat is her last name. And she wrote a great book on it, Not 1 Inch. But I've known about this for years. There was never an agreement, first of all. Gorbachev himself in 2014 said there was no agreement ever. NATO wasn't even discussed.
Yeah.
But then you have to now ask the questions, why would that be? Why would that be that NATO wasn't discussed in 1989? Because in 1989, if you looked at a map, the question that Baker and Bush and all of these people were talking about, and Reagan before, was the question of reunification of East Germany with West Germany. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. Baker said that statement in early 1990. The Soviet Union still existed at the time. Soviet Union didn't dissolve. Baltics were making moves, for sure, but the Soviet Union didn't dissolve until the end of 1991. So the Warsaw Pact, which was the Soviet Union's bullshit counter to NATO, right? How they included, Poland and Czechoslovakia and all the former Eastern Bloc countries, Hungary, non-Soviet Eastern Bloc countries. So you had, in 1989, when this statement was made by Baker, the U.S. Secretary of State at the time, it was a world where the Warsaw Pact existed. It was there on a map, like it was on children's school books. The Soviet Union existed. The only thing that was up for discussion at that time was East Germany reunifying with West Germany. And the discussion was not one, and it was a passing comment, of course. Gorbachev said as much. The discussion was, we will not take our nuclear weapons 1 inch into East Germany. Because the Soviet Union, what was the discussion? Why was East Germany even allowed to consider reunification? First of all, because they're all Germans, and it was their right to try to decide that. But the Soviet Union, the occupying power in the East, was completely bankrupt. The U.S. knew it. We were funding them. We were giving them loans again and again and again. And so that was the discussion. That was the context, was a bankrupt Soviet Union had to withdraw its troops from East Germany, just like today when they can't afford to feed their troops. Exact same thing. And on the map, the only thing that could have been discussed in 1989 and 1990 was East Germany. The Warsaw Pact still existed. Soviet Union still existed. So that comment is not even in the right universe to where we are today. Had nothing to do with NATO, nothing at all. And Gorbachev himself said that in 2014. So that's a little bit about
it's big. I hear it every fucking week. I hear it every
they
fucking
have no idea
week.
what they're talking about.
No, but the thing is, this is how you like Russia is bad on pretty much all fronts except for information war. And that's where they have managed to kind of encapsulate these few talking points, which then these Western tankies are parroting all the time, or who there's this whole movement is like, whatever US does, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And these people have caught on this. US bad, so I'm going to support whatever it is the other side is doing. And but even then, like, I mean, Ukraine and Russia, sure, they've been having a long history together, but that doesn't mean that they need to have long future together. I mean, people can determine their path, and one country decided to embrace this kleptocracy and basically a rotten system where they are locked, pushed down to earth. They don't earn wages. They are just their only good thing that they hear is that we are fucking up somebody else somewhere abroad, or Crimea is ours. And the other country, Ukraine, was held down for a long time as well. But the other country saw like, we're out of here. Like, come on, this is not our future. and now the ex-boyfriend is mad. Fuck this.
Yeah.
One final question I want to hear your thoughts on something that you, Janis, mentioned, is that Russia is good at information war, and they were, right? They have been very successful dividing Europe and infiltrating everything also in the US, but now during the war they are terribly losing the information war to Ukraine. Is it because it's just unwinnable with the atrocities that is going on, and that the facts are so brutal that it's impossible to spin it anyway positively? Because I mean, clearly, at least in my media space, Ukraine is destroying Russia every day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But Russia was supposed to be good at this.
No, the thing is there are levels of that, and I think Ukrainians are doing this surface level info, and we think that they are only winning. Obviously, our Twitter shows just destroyed tanks, and we see nothing from the other side. They're doing great job on this, but I think what I thought was more like this deeper level, like seeding doubts. Like Russia knows that atrocities that they are being filmed. You cannot tell they didn't happen. What they need is to seed this doubt. Maybe it was not all like they say, and that's for them is already a victory, because instead of being blamed for Bucha, and then it's like some people are like, maybe, like there was a German politician yesterday that also said it's staged, like come on, and that's already good for them.
Yes, I agree, but I think more agree with Uldis here in that finally, thankfully, we have. The attention is now being paid. We have the NATO fellas, and we have we have brighter. I know it sounds so pejorative to a lot of Russians who are against this war. I know, but there's brighter, more dedicated, freedom-loving, and people that are that have experienced this and are never ever going to go back. And Russians just have not given that to themselves yet, right? They have not taken that upon themselves yet. Well, we all did it. And we made it happen, and we were never, ever, ever letting a country like Ukraine slide back into that orbit. So, our information warfare now is, so pure and so on point, in my opinion. Obviously, I know we're all biased on this show here. People would agree. Tankies in the West would disagree with us. But we're finally, coming out, and where I'm really optimistic about Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, the theme I've been saying here on the show. We're really, really coming out, and I think that, yes, even though they're still sowing those seeds of doubt, Janis, I think that, I mean, if one of Russia's greatest allies, Iran, gets toppled, this week, I mean, and the whole system changes there. I mean, who's to say it's not going to move from Dagestan and Chechnya even, and just keep moving up.
I agree. It's not working
Moscow.
as well anymore.
Crazy.
As well, it's not working as well. And when the guy has to say, "This is not a bluff," by the way, when somebody says threatens, when Russia used to threaten, people used to listen, and now you have to emphasize that it's not a bluff, by the way, and it's really not a bluff. So. Yeah, it's not working as well, definitely. It's still there, because Western Europe just don't know the nuances of the plight that we people have been through. Well, it's our job to educate, I guess. All right. Well, listen. On this note, support Ukraine. Actually, we're gonna drop a link in our description. We have done before. If you want to take action, just donate some money. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Awesome conversation with Matthew. I think we had a great banter on so many topics that is on our hearts and minds and wallets. As always, very real conversation without just trying to positively spin everything. But there are some positive spins. So thanks, guys, a lot for this banter today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. It was fun. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, looking forward to having times when we can mostly be positive. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.